The Gobi Desert stretches across northern China and southern Mongolia like a vast ocean of sand, one of the most beautiful and most dangerous places on Earth. It is a land of stunning and deadly extremes where scorching heat by day gives way to freezing cold by night. It is truly deadly terrain where only the hardiest of nomads can dream of survival, and it remains an equally deadly land for the animals who inhabit it. Yet even within this endless, unforgiving wilderness, there exist concealed pockets of hope. Oases, tiny springs of life-giving water surrounded by patches of precious grass, provide food and water for the desperate creatures eking out an existence. Among those creatures are herds of cattle, camels, some wild animals, and some semi-domesticated animals roaming these endless dune seas. These isolated pools aren't just water sources, they're lifelines, the difference between life and death. It was at one of these remote desert oases where an extraordinary story unfolded, a story of both survival and compassion, and the incredible bond between humans and animals as they stood together in defiance of the desert. The sun was relentless that day, beating down on the sand with an intensity that made the air shimmer and dance. Near the edge of the oasis, partially hidden in the reeds and soft mud, was a sight that would break anyone's heart. An old cow lay completely stuck, trapped in the treacherous waterlogged sand at the shoreline. To have gotten to the very edge of relief and to be in such danger was truly a cruel irony. She had come here desperate for water, following that ancient, powerful instinct that guides all living things toward survival, perhaps so thirsty she could actually smell the water from far away. But the ground near the oasis, saturated and soft from the constant moisture, had become her doom. What should have been salvation had become a death trap. With every movement, every struggle to free herself, she had only sunk deeper into the mire. The wet sand clung to her legs like cement, the suction force pulling her down, holding her prisoner. It was very much like quicksand, that natural phenomenon that has terrified people throughout history. And now, after what must have been days of fighting, she had nothing left. No energy, no strength, just shallow labored breaths and the fading hope that somehow, some way, she might survive, that somebody might actually save her. Her body was almost completely submerged, with only her head and upper back visible above the mud. It was clear she had been trapped for a very, very long time. Her body told a devastating story. Every single rib was visible beneath her hide. Her once sturdy frame had withered away to almost nothing, just skin stretched impossibly tight over bone. She had been trapped for so long that she was almost past the point of survival. She was literally starving to death, unable to reach the grass that grew just a few feet away, unable to properly drink the water that surrounded her. To be dying of thirst and hunger when surrounded by a bounty of food and water was nature's cruel joke. The local herdsmen who passed by had probably seen her days ago, and in the harsh reality of desert life, they had made a heartbreaking but practical decision. She was too far gone. The effort to save her would be too great. In the Gobi, sometimes hard choices must be made. Sometimes nature must take its course, no matter how much it hurts. And those nomadic herders also had to preserve their strength if they were going to survive themselves. But on this particular day, fate had other plans. A convoy of SUVs crested a nearby dune, kicking up plumes of fine desert dust. It was a group of travelers, urban adventurers from the city, out exploring the legendary Gobi Desert in their rugged four-wheel drives. A very different kind of nomad, they traveled for fun, not for necessity. They were probably talking and laughing, marveling at the stunning landscape, when someone spotted something unusual near the water. They were on a year-long journey of adventure. They had already crossed the mighty Australian outback and the long Mekong Delta River in Vietnam. They had been to India and experienced desert, jungle, and rivers, and had decided that they preferred the warm dryness of the desert. They thought they were explorers being part of the lands that they visited. But all of that changed today. Now they became part of nature's story, not just observers. Every single vehicle came to an immediate halt. Doors flew open. One by one, people jumped out, shielding their eyes against the bright sun as they hurried toward the shoreline. And as they got closer, the full reality of what they were seeing hit them all at once. There was no discussion about whether to stop, no debate about whether it was worth the time and effort. In that moment, faced with a creature in desperate need, the vast emptiness of the desert disappeared. Nothing else mattered except one simple, powerful truth. This animal needed help, and they were going to give it to her. Because that's what compassion looks like. It doesn't calculate the odds. It doesn't ask if it's convenient. It just shows up and does what needs to be done. The group moved with purpose, quickly gathering supplies from their vehicles, ropes, shovels, anything that might help. They formed a circle around the trapped cow, assessing the situation with growing concern. The mud had her in an iron grip, and breaking that grip wasn't going to be easy. The ropes had been used to help free their SYVS if they became trapped in the shifting sands. They had previously used them to help scale a mighty cliff escarpment. The cow was fortunate that the tools these adventurers had chosen to bring with them were also perfectly suited to saving her life. They had also bought with them professional video recording equipment to record their year-long mission of adventure. Someone took charge, calling out instructions to get ropes around her chest and distribute the pressure so they wouldn't hurt her when they pulled. Others dropped to their knees in the wet sand, using their hands and small shovels to carefully dig around her buried legs. Every scoop revealed just how deeply she was trapped. Her hind legs were buried almost completely, locked in place by the powerful suction of the saturated ground. The sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat poured from everyone's faces. The work was absolutely exhausting, the kind of physical labor that makes muscles scream and hands blister. But nobody complained. Nobody suggested giving up. The unofficial leader shouted for everyone to get ready, and on the count of 3, they pulled with all their might. The ropes went taut, shoulders hunched, legs braced against the sand. Every person pulled with everything they had, fighting against the mud's relentless suction. The cow remained motionless, perhaps understanding on some deep primal level that these humans were her only chance. It was a battle of willpower against physics. The cow was emaciated, yes, but even in her weakened state, she was still incredibly heavy. Combined with the mire's powerful grip, it felt like they were trying to move a boulder through quicksand. Minutes turned into an hour. The group's initial burst of adrenaline began to fade, replaced by burning muscles and gasping breaths. It would have been so easy to give up, to tell themselves they had tried their best, that sometimes, despite the best efforts, not everyone can be saved. But they didn't give up. They couldn't. Because somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about a random cow in the desert. It had become personal. They had made a silent promise. To this animal, to each other, to themselves. They were going to save her life, no matter how long it took. And then, after what felt like forever, they felt it. Movement. Just a tiny bit at first. But movement. The suction was breaking. The mud was releasing its grip. With a final collective groan of effort and a thick, wet, slurping sound that echoed across the quiet oasis, she came free. Inch by precious inch, they dragged her from the mire that had held her captive. Her body emerged slowly, first her front legs, then her torso, finally her hind legs sliding free from the heavy, wet sand. As she lay on solid ground for the first time in days, her true condition became devastatingly clear. She was even thinner than they had realized, completely drained of energy. Her legs trembled uncontrollably, unable to support her weight. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. But she was free. After days of being trapped, slowly dying in the mud, she was finally, beautifully free. Several of the rescuers were openly crying now, the emotional weight of what they had just accomplished hitting them all at once. They had literally pulled a life back from the edge of death. But the rescue was only the first step. Now came the critical question. After being trapped for so long, would her legs even work? When blood flow is cut off for extended periods, muscles can die. Permanent damage can set in. A cow that cannot walk in the desert is a cow that cannot survive. They needed to help her regain her strength, and fast. The group scattered across the oasis, searching for any vegetation they could find. In the harsh desert environment, grass was scarce, but they gathered every blade, every stem, every leaf they could locate. Handfuls of precious green were brought back and placed gently in front of the exhausted cow's decision. The one thing they didn't do was record their actions. The expensive video equipment remained in its protective cases on their vehicles. None of them discussed their actions, but it was a mutual decision. Saving a life was somehow too important and sacred a job to be distracted by recording it, though they would never forget their actions that day. Her reaction was immediate and absolutely heartbreaking. She was so hungry, so desperately, painfully hungry, that she didn't hesitate for even a second. She devoured the grass frantically, chewing with an urgency that showed just how close she had come to starving to death. Handful after handful disappeared. The travelers kept bringing more, kept searching for more, making trip after trip across the small oasis. Watching her eat was a powerful reminder of something often taken for granted: the preciousness of food and water, the fundamental needs that drive all living creatures. 2 hours went by. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. The group had established an impromptu camp, settling in for what they knew would be a long wait. Because the cow still hadn't stood up. She was stronger, yes. The food had helped enormously. But her legs remained folded beneath her, her body still too weak to rise. The concern deepened. They were in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles from the nearest town. No veterinarian could be called. No medical equipment was available. She could only live if she could walk. As long as she could walk, her powerful survival instincts would guide her home, wherever that distant pasture might be. The travelers didn't give up on her. They spoke to her softly, words of encouragement in soothing tones. They petted her gently, letting her know she wasn't alone. And after more time had passed, after more grass had been consumed, they decided to try helping her stand. With patient, careful assistance, lifting her flanks, steadying her shoulders, supporting her weight, she finally, tentatively, began to rise. It was one of the most profound moments any of them had ever witnessed. Her legs trembled so badly that it seemed impossible she could remain upright. Her balance was precarious, her body swaying dangerously. But she was standing. Against all odds, despite everything she had been through, she was on her feet again. And then, amazingly, she took a step, then another. Slow, shaky, uncertain steps. But steps nonetheless. She was walking. The first thing she did was head straight for the water's edge, carefully avoiding the soft mire that had trapped her, driven by a thirst that matched her hunger. She lowered her head and drank deeply, long gulps of cool, clean water disappearing down her throat. The sound of celebration erupted across the quiet desert evening. Cheers and applause echoed off the dunes. Strangers hugged each other, united by the incredible thing they had just accomplished together. A life had been saved. A death sentence had been overturned. In the middle of one of the harshest environments on earth, compassion had won. After drinking her fill, the old cow slowly made her way to a patch of grass near the oasis edge. Her movements were stiff, her muscles clearly lame and painful from days without use. She wouldn't be running anywhere anytime soon. But the critical elements for her recovery were now available: food, water, and freedom. With these basic necessities, everyone knew she would heal. The rescue was complete. It was more than just a physical extraction from the mud. It was a reversal of what had seemed like an inevitable tragedy. Animals have an incredible capacity for resilience, for healing, for survival when given even the smallest chance. Her leg muscles had been severely damaged from being stuck for so long without movement, but now they had the opportunity to recover. She would heal slowly by walking around the oasis perimeter, stimulating blood flow and rebuilding strength one step at a time. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, as it always does in the desert, the group didn't rush to pack up and leave. They stayed. They became silent guardians in the night, choosing to watch over her condition, ensuring she was safe from predators and stable enough to survive the critical first night of her freedom. Under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, the cow continued eating. Non-stop. A continuous, determined effort to rebuild her depleted reserves. The travelers understood the unspoken agreement. Only after fully recovering could she set off for home, wherever that distant pasture might be. This little oasis, Crescent Lake in the vast Gobi, was truly her lifeline. For the next few days, perhaps even a week, she would remain here. She would eat and drink and rest. She would rebuild her muscle mass, strengthen her lame legs, and heal from her terrible ordeal. And when she was ready, when she was strong enough, she would begin the journey home. The story of what happened that day isn't just about one cow in one desert. It's about what happens when people choose compassion over convenience, when they choose to act instead of looking away, when they choose to believe that every life, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has value and deserves a chance. Those travelers could have kept driving. They could have convinced themselves that one old cow wasn't worth the time, the effort, the exhaustion. But they didn't. They stopped. They worked for hours in the brutal heat. They refused to give up, even when it seemed hopeless. And because of that choice, that simple, beautiful choice to care, a life was saved. The Gobi Desert witnessed a small miracle that day. Not a miracle of divine intervention, but a miracle of human compassion. The kind of miracle that happens every time someone chooses kindness, every time someone sees suffering and refuses to look away, every time someone believes that making a difference for even one life is worth everything. That old cow, who had been abandoned to a certain death, got an amazing second chance. She got to walk again on her four hooves, to eat the grass that had surrounded her when she was so hungry, and to quench her thirst. Those tourists got both a story they would tell over and over, but more importantly, they got to know they had truly made a difference. All because a group of strangers decided that her life mattered. Where there is life, there is hope, even from a group of travelers who managed to turn their adventure into her chance at life. And that's the most beautiful thing of all.